The day everything changed, the autumn sun painted Boston's streets in shades of amber and gold as Daniel Brennan drove through the busy downtown traffic. His daughter Mia sat in the back seat, her nose buried in a tablet, playing some game she had begged him to download last week. It was a regular Thursday afternoon, the kind where nothing extraordinary was supposed to happen. Daniel was thinking about the architectural project waiting on his desk when Mia's voice suddenly cut through the hum of the car radio. "Stop the car," she said, her voice small but urgent. Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror. "What is it, sweetheart?" "We're almost home." That woman, Mia pressed her face against the window, pointing frantically. "Dad, that woman looks exactly like Mom." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. 3 years had passed since Rebecca died from a sudden brain aneurysm. 3 years of therapy and tears and learning to live with the emptiness. Mia had been only 6 when it happened, too young to fully understand death, old enough to feel the loss every single day. "Honey, sometimes people remind us of those we miss," Daniel began gently, his throat tight. "But your mom is gone. You know that." "No, Dad, look. Please, just look." The desperation in her voice made him pull over. Daniel turned in his seat to follow his daughter's pointing finger. Through the passenger window, he saw her. A woman sitting on a worn piece of cardboard outside a closed storefront. She wore layers of mismatched clothing, her hair tangled and unwashed. But her face, dear God, her face. It was Rebecca's face. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical. The blood drained from Daniel's face. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was impossible. Completely impossible. Yet there she was, this woman who could have been his wife's reflection, sitting among the forgotten people of the city. First contact, Daniel fumbled with his seatbelt, his hands shaking. "Stay in the car, Mia. Lock the doors." "But Dad, is it her? Is Mom alive?" Tears streamed down Mia's face. "I don't know, baby. Just stay here. I'll be right back." He crossed the street like a man in a dream, his legs moving independently of his brain. The woman didn't look up as he approached. She was humming softly to herself, a melody he didn't recognize. Up close, the resemblance was even more startling. She had the same heart-shaped face, the same delicate nose. Even the same small scar above her left eyebrow that Rebecca had gotten, falling off her bike as a child. "Excuse me," Daniel's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. "Miss, are you okay?" The woman glanced up. Her eyes were the same hazel color as Rebecca's, but they held a different kind of pain. A deeper weariness that came from surviving rather than living. She studied him for a moment, then looked away. "I'm fine." "Don't need any trouble." Her voice was Rebecca's voice, but harder, edged with years of distrust. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to talk. Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "People call me Claire." "Claire." Daniel crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. "Claire, this is going to sound crazy, but you look exactly like someone I knew. Someone who passed away." Claire's expression shifted, something flickering across her features. Recognition? Fear? It was gone before Daniel could identify it. "I get that sometimes. Must have one of those faces." She started gathering her belongings, a few plastic bags with who knew what inside. "Wait, please." Daniel pulled out his phone, his hands still trembling. He scrolled through his photos until he found one of Rebecca from 4 years ago, standing in their kitchen, laughing at something outside the frame. This was my wife. Her name was Rebecca. Rebecca Brennan. Does that name mean anything to you? Claire stopped moving. She stared at the photo for a long moment, her breathing growing shallow. "I don't know any Rebecca, but you could be her twin. You could be sisters. Do you have any family? Do you know where you were born?" "I don't remember much." Claire's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Just bits and pieces. A big building with lots of beds. A woman who said she was my mother, but she wasn't kind. Then streets. Always streets." Daniel felt something break open inside his chest. This woman, this broken, lost woman with his dead wife's face, had been alone and suffering while Rebecca had lived a comfortable life with loving parents. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. "The investigation begins over the next week," Daniel couldn't let it go. He hired a private investigator named Jack Monroe, a former police detective with a reputation for finding answers others couldn't. He also reached out to Nina Rodriguez, a journalist he knew from college who specialized in exposing adoption fraud and family secrets.
Daniel?
I've seen strange cases, but this one takes the prize, Jack said during their first meeting. He spread photos across Daniel's desk. Pictures of Claire taken from a distance alongside photos of Rebecca. Side by side, the resemblance was undeniable. If these are two different women, they're identical twins. But here's what I don't understand. Rebecca's birth certificate lists her as a single birth. No mention of a twin? Nina leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. That's not uncommon in illegal adoptions or black market baby sales. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, there were several scandals involving hospitals and adoption agencies separating twins, telling parents one baby didn't survive, then selling the other child. It was more common than people want to admit. Daniel felt sick. Rebecca's parents never mentioned anything. Her mother, Helen, is still alive. She lives in a nursing home in Cambridge, and that's where we start, Nina said. But Daniel, you need to prepare yourself. If this woman really is Rebecca's twin, finding out why they were separated might reveal things your in-laws didn't want known. The next day, Daniel visited Helen Brennan at Sunset Gardens nursing home. At 78, Helen's mind was still sharp. Though her body had been weakened by arthritis and a mild stroke 2 years prior, she smiled when she saw Daniel, her face lighting up the way it always did when he brought Mia to visit. Daniel, dear. Where's my granddaughter? She's at school, Helen. I came alone today because I need to ask you something important. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed her the photo he'd taken of Claire from across the street. Do you know this woman? Helen's smile vanished. The color drained from her face, and her hands began to shake. Where did you get this picture? She's here in Boston. Living on the streets? Helen, she looks exactly like Rebecca. Exactly. I need to know the truth. Was Rebecca a twin? Helen's eyes filled with tears. She looked away, her jaw working as if she was fighting some internal battle. Finally she spoke, her voice barely audible. We were so young. Howard and I, we were barely making ends meet. I got pregnant and we were happy, but then the doctor told me I was having twins. She wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. We couldn't afford babies. We could barely afford one. The hospital, there was a program. They said they could help. They said one baby would go to a good family, that she'd have a better life than we could give her. Daniel felt his world tilting. You gave her away? You gave away Rebecca's sister? We thought we were doing the right thing. The nurse, she said the other family was wealthy, that the baby would want for nothing. We signed papers. They told us we'd never hear from her again, that it was a closed adoption, permanent. We tried to find her years later when we were more stable financially, but the agency had closed. The records were gone. We thought maybe she was happy somewhere, living a good life. She's been living on the streets, Helen, homeless, probably for years. Daniel's voice was sharp with anger he couldn't contain. While Rebecca had a family, a home, education, love, her identical twin was out there alone. Did Rebecca know? No, we never told her. How could we? It would have broken her heart. We thought about it sometimes, especially as she got older, but the moment never seemed right. And then she died so young, and we thought it didn't matter anymore. Helen sobbed openly now. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I've lived with this guilt for 40 years. Daniel stood up, his mind racing. He thought about Rebecca, about all the conversations they'd had about family, about children, about belonging. She never knew she was a twin. Never knew there was someone in the world who shared her exact DNA, in Claire. Claire had lived a nightmare while her sister lived a life that should have been shared between them. Reaching out, Daniel found Claire again, 2 days later in the same area. This time, he brought food, water, and a proposition. She eyed him suspiciously as he approached, already starting to pack up her things. Please don't run. I'm not here to hurt you. I brought lunch. He held up a bag from a nearby deli. Just hear me out. Claire's stomach growled audibly. Pride warred with hunger on her face. Hunger won. She took the bag and sat back down, tearing into a sandwich with the urgency of someone who never knew where her next meal was coming from. Daniel waited until she'd eaten half the sandwich before speaking. I talked to Rebecca's mother. She confirmed what I suspected. You and Rebecca were twins. You were separated at birth because her parents couldn't afford to raise both of you. They thought you were going to a good home. Claire stopped chewing. She stared at him, sandwich frozen halfway to her mouth. Twins? Yes, identical twins. Rebecca never knew about you. Her parents kept it secret. But you have every right to know who you are, where you came from. Daniel pulled out a business card. I want to help you. I'd like to run a DNA test to confirm everything, and if you're willing, I'd like to help you get back on your feet. Your family, Claire. You're Mia's aunt. She deserves to know you, and you deserve better than this. Claire looked down at the card, then back at Daniel. Tears rolled down her dirty cheeks, cutting clean tracks through the grime. Why? Why do you care about me? Because Rebecca would have cared. Because you deserved the same life she had. Because my daughter saw you and recognized something I should have seen. Because it's the right thing to do. Daniel's voice softened. You don't have to decide right now. But please, think about it. I'm staying at the Marriott on Cambridge Street, room 412. Here's some cash. Get yourself a hot meal, maybe a motel room for the night. Tomorrow, if you want, come find me. He left her there with $200, the deli bag, and his business card. As he walked back to his car, he had no idea if she'd come. But for the first time since Rebecca died, Daniel felt like he was doing something that mattered, something that would have made his wife proud. That night, Mia asked him again about the woman. Daniel sat on the edge of her bed and told her a simplified version of the truth. Mia listened with wide eyes, then asked the question that had been haunting Daniel since this whole thing began. If she's Mom's twin, does that mean she's kind of like Mom? Like a piece of Mom came back. Daniel brushed hair from his daughter's forehead. She's her own person, sweetheart. But yes, in a way, she carries part of your mom with her. In her face, in her DNA. If she lets us help her, maybe you'll get to know her. Would you like that? Mia nodded solemnly. I think Mom would want us to help her. I think so too, baby. I think so too. The next morning, Daniel was drinking coffee in the hotel lobby when he saw her. Claire stood just inside the entrance, clean but obviously uncomfortable. She'd used some of the money for a shower at a truck stop, he guessed. Her hair was still damp, pulled back in a ponytail. She wore the same clothes, but they'd been washed. She looked younger this way, more vulnerable, more like Rebecca. Their eyes met across the lobby. Claire took a tentative step forward, then another. Daniel stood up, his heart pounding with hope and fear, and something that felt almost like joy. I'm scared, Claire said when she reached him. I know, Daniel replied. But you don't have to be scared alone anymore.
How?
And in that moment, in a hotel lobby in Boston, two lives irrevocably changed by a tragedy neither understood began to slowly, carefully interweave. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be DNA tests, legal battles, therapy, and the painful process of unearthing buried secrets. But for now, there was this. A connection, a possibility, and the first fragile threads of what might someday become family. The DNA results DR. Timothy Walsh's office was located in a modern medical building. Overlooking the Charles River, Daniel sat in the waiting room with Claire, who fidgeted nervously with the sleeve of her new jacket. Over the past 2 weeks, Daniel had helped her find temporary housing at a women's shelter that offered support services. She was clean, fed, and beginning to look healthier, though the haunted look in her eyes remained. Mr. Brennan? Miss Sullivan? The doctor will see you now. The receptionist smiled warmly, but Claire still tensed at the formal address. She wasn't used to being treated with respect. Dr. Walsh was a tall man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He shook both their hands before settling behind his desk. I have your results. Before I share them, I want you to understand what they mean. We ran a comprehensive DNA analysis, comparing samples from Claire, from Rebecca's preserved medical records, and from Mia. Daniel reached over and took Claire's hand. It was cold and trembling. Just tell us. Claire Sullivan and Rebecca Brennan were identical twins. The genetic markers match perfectly. There is no doubt whatsoever. Dr. Walsh pulled out several printed reports. Furthermore, Claire is definitely Mia's biological aunt. The familial connection is unmistakable. Claire made a small sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. I have a family. I actually have a family. You do, Daniel confirmed, squeezing her hand. You have Mia and Helen and me. We're your family now, Dr. Walsh continued, his expression growing more serious. There's something else. During our analysis, we found some concerning indicators in Claire's blood work and genetic markers. Evidence of long-term malnutrition, untreated infections, and what appears to be signs of past physical trauma. I'd like to refer you to some specialists who can help address these issues. Claire pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. I'm fine. I survived. That's what matters. Surviving isn't the same as living, Dr. Walsh said gently. You deserve proper medical care. You deserve healing, not just survival. As they left the office, Daniel felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that the DNA confirmed what they'd suspected, and fury at the system that had failed Claire so completely. He pulled out his phone and called Nina Rodriguez. Nina, it's confirmed. They're twins. I need you to dig deeper. I want to know everything about that adoption agency, about the hospital, about everyone involved in separating them. Already on it, Nina replied. And Daniel, I found something. You need to see this. The journalist's discovery they met Nina at a small cafe in Cambridge. She arrived with a worn leather briefcase stuffed with documents. Claire eyed her warily, still uncomfortable around strangers, but she stayed when Daniel asked her to trust him. Nina spread papers across the table. I've been investigating St. Catherine's Hospital and the Hope Springs Adoption Agency. Both closed in 1995 amid scandal. What I found is disturbing. She pulled out a newspaper article from 1995. The headline read, Local Adoption Agency Shut Down After Fraud Investigation. Between 1982 and 1994, Hope Springs facilitated over 300 adoptions. At least 60 of those were done illegally. They targeted poor families, unwed mothers, and immigrants. They'd convinced these families that giving up their babies was the only option. Sometimes even telling mothers their babies had died when they'd actually been placed for adoption. Claire's face had gone pale. They told someone I died? Not exactly. In your case, they told Helen and Howard Brennan that you were going to a wealthy family in California named Sullivan. They said it was a closed adoption, that you'd have a better life.
Ow.
Nina pulled out another document. But here's where it gets twisted. Robert Sullivan, the man listed as your adoptive father, paid the agency under the table. $15,000? That was a lot of money in 1985. Who is Robert Sullivan? Daniel asked. A trucker from Maine with a drinking problem and a criminal record. He and his wife Louise adopted you, but Louise died when you were 3. After that, Robert raised you alone, if you can call it raising. Nina turned to Claire. Do you remember him? Claire's hands clenched into fists. Tall man. Always angry. He'd leave me alone for days sometimes. When I was 7, he just didn't come back. I waited in that apartment for a week before the landlord found me. They put me in foster care after that. Robert Sullivan died in a car accident in 1992. He was drunk. Nina's voice was heavy with disgust. The agency took Helen and Howard's money, told them their baby was going to a good home, and sold you to the highest bidder without any proper vetting. When Robert's wife died, there was nobody to check on you. You fell through every crack in the system. Daniel felt rage building in his chest. Someone needs to pay for this. The people who ran that agency destroyed lives. Most of them are dead or in prison, Nina said. But there's one person still alive who was directly involved. Margaret Finch. She was the head nurse at St. Catherine's who facilitated the private adoptions. She lives in a retirement community in Vermont. I think she knows more than what's in these files. Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need air. Daniel followed her outside. She was pacing the sidewalk, her breathing rapid and shallow, Claire talked to me. All this time, I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough to be loved, that I deserved everything that happened. But it wasn't my fault. Someone took me from my real family and gave me to a monster. Someone stole my life. Her voice broke. My sister had parents who loved her, a husband, a daughter. She had everything I should have had. Daniel pulled her into a hug, and this time she didn't pull away. You're right. It's not fair. But we can't change the past. We can only move forward. And I promise you, Claire, you're not alone anymore. We're going to make sure everyone knows the truth. Confronting the past, the journey to Vermont took 4 hours. Daniel drove while Claire sat in the passenger seat, watching the landscape change from urban to rural. Mia was in the back seat, having insisted on coming despite Daniel's reservations. I want to meet Aunt Claire's enemy, she'd declared with 9-year-old determination. Mom would want me to be brave. Shady Pines Retirement Community was a pleasant-looking facility surrounded by maple trees, just beginning to turn autumn colors. The receptionist directed them to the sunroom, where Margaret Finch sat in a wheelchair, a blanket over her knees despite the warm afternoon at 83. Margaret was a small woman with papery skin and sharp blue eyes that studied them as they approached. I know why you're here, she said before they could introduce themselves. I saw the news reports. The twin sisters separated at birth. You're one of mine, aren't you? Claire's jaw tightened. You remember me? I remember all of them. Every single baby. Margaret's voice was steady, unrepentant. Sit down. You came all this way. Might as well hear the whole story. They sat. Mia pressed close to Daniel, sensing the tension. St. Catherine's was a Catholic hospital serving a poor community. We saw girls come in with no money, no support, no way to care for babies. The church taught that abortion was murder, but they didn't teach how to feed hungry children. So we found another way. Margaret folded her hands in her lap. Hope Springs connected babies with families who wanted them. Yes, money changed hands. That's how the world works. But those babies got homes. You sold them, Daniel said, his voice hard. You sold children like merchandise. I found them families, Margaret corrected. Most of those children had good lives. Better than what they would have had in poverty. I didn't, Claire said quietly. The man you sold me to was an abusive drunk who abandoned me when I was 7. I spent the next 30 years on the streets. My sister got a loving home while I got hell. Does that make you feel good about your choices? For the first time, Margaret's composure cracked. She looked away. We tried to screen the families. We tried to make good matches. We tried to make money, Nina interjected. She'd been recording the conversation on her phone. You took advantage of desperate people on both sides. Birth parents who trusted you, and children who had no choice. What do you want from me? I'm an old woman waiting to die. I can't undo the past. Margaret's voice had lost its strength. I want you to admit what you did was wrong, Claire said, standing up. I want you to say that my life mattered. That I deserved better. That you're sorry? Margaret met Claire's eyes. The silence stretched for a long moment. Finally, the old woman nodded. You deserved better. They all did. I told myself I was doing God's work, helping babies find homes. But I was helping myself to money I didn't earn through lies I shouldn't have told. If I could go back, I'd do things differently. But I can't. So yes, I'm sorry. For whatever that's worth now, it wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. Claire turned and walked out of the sunroom without another word. Daniel, Mia, and Nina followed. In the parking lot, Claire broke down completely. She sobbed into her hands while Mia wrapped small arms around her waist, and Daniel rubbed her back. Nina stood nearby, giving them space, but staying close enough to help if needed. She's sorry, Claire gasped between sobs. 40 years too late, but she's sorry. And it doesn't change anything. It doesn't give me back the family I lost. It doesn't erase the hunger or the cold or the fear. It doesn't bring back my sister. No, Daniel agreed. But it gives you the truth, and the truth means you can start healing. Family court judge Patricia Monroe had a reputation for fairness and compassion, which was why Daniel's brother Greg had recommended her for their case. They weren't suing anyone. There was nobody left to sue who had money or life left to lose. Instead, they were petitioning the court to legally establish Claire's identity and grant her access to Rebecca's family medical records. Photos and personal effects. Helen Brennan had agreed to everything. She'd given a deposition from her nursing home bed, tearfully explaining the circumstances of the separation and her lifelong guilt. She'd signed papers granting Claire full access to the Brennan family documents and her portion of what little inheritance remained. The hearing took place on a gray October morning. Claire wore a simple dress that Nina had helped her pick out. Her hair was styled, and she looked more like Rebecca than ever, healthy and nervous, and heartbreakingly similar to the woman Daniel had loved. Judge Monroe reviewed the DNA evidence, the adoption documents, and the witness statements. "This is an unusual case," she said finally, "but the evidence is clear. Claire Sullivan is legally and biologically Claire Brennan, twin sister of Rebecca Brennan, deceased. I'm granting the petition, Ms. Sullivan. You have every right to your family history, your identity, and your place in this family." She looked at Daniel. "Mr. Brennan, you're not legally required to provide for Miss Sullivan. She's not your wife, and she's not your dependent. But I commend you for stepping up when you didn't have to. Mia is lucky to have a father who teaches by example." Daniel smiled at Mia, who was sitting in the gallery with Greg. "I'm lucky to have a daughter who sees people's hearts instead of their circumstances." After the hearing, they went to lunch at Mia's favorite restaurant. It was the first time Claire had been in a nice restaurant in decades. She studied the menu nervously, unsure what to order, afraid of ordering something too expensive. "Get whatever you want," Daniel assured her. "Today we're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" Claire asked. Mia said simply, "We're celebrating you." Finding home over the next few months, Claire began the hard work of rebuilding a life. She moved into a small apartment that Daniel helped her furnish. She started therapy with Dr. Lily Chen, a trauma specialist who worked with formerly homeless individuals. The sessions were painful, forcing Claire to confront memories she'd buried for survival, but slowly she began to heal. She got a job at a local library, shelving books and helping patrons. It was simple work, but it gave her purpose and routine. She learned to trust again, though it didn't come easily. She learned to accept help, to believe she deserved good things, to look at herself in the mirror and see someone valuable. Mia visited her twice a week. They'd have tea and cookies, and Mia would talk about school, friends, and the things she remembered about her mother. Claire would listen, learning about her sister through a child's memories, grateful for every story, every detail, every glimpse into the life Rebecca had lived. One evening in December, Daniel invited Claire to dinner at his house. It was the first time she'd been there since everything began. The house was decorated for Christmas, twinkling lights and evergreen garland making everything feel warm and festive. "I have something for you," Helen said. Daniel had picked her up from the nursing home for the occasion. She held out a small wooden box with trembling hands. These were Rebecca's. Things from when she was a baby. Pictures, her hospital bracelet, a lock of hair from her first haircut. "I want you to have half of everything. You should have had these memories too." Claire opened the box with tears in her eyes. Inside were photos of a baby who looked exactly like she must have looked, wearing tiny clothes held by parents who had loved her even as they gave away her twin. There were birthday cards and report cards, dance recital programs, and Girl Scout badges. An entire childhood documented in paper and photographs. "There are two of everything here," Claire realized, looking closer at the photos. "I bought 2 outfits every time," Helen admitted. "To birthday gifts, to Christmas presents. I'd give one to Rebecca and put one away in that box. I told myself if we ever found you, I'd have something to give you. Something to show that we never forgot you, even when we weren't brave enough to look." Claire hugged Helen carefully, mindful of her fragile body. "Thank you. This means everything." They ate dinner together, the 5 of them gathered around Daniel's table. Claire, Daniel, Mia, Helen, and Greg. An unusual family, brought together by tragedy and genetics and the simple choice to care. They talked and laughed, and for the first time since her sister died, Daniel felt something that resembled peace. After dinner, Mia took Claire's hand. "Aunt Claire, can I show you something?" She led Claire upstairs to her bedroom. On the wall was a new painting, done in a child's careful hand. It showed 4 figures: a tall man, a little girl, a woman with angel wings in the clouds, and another woman on the ground holding the little girl's hand. "That's you," Mia explained, pointing to the grounded woman. "And that's Mom, watching from heaven. Dad says Mom's spirit lives in our memories, but you're real. You're here. And I think Mom sent you to us because she knew we needed you, and maybe you needed us too." Claire knelt down and pulled Mia into a tight hug. "I did need you. I needed you so much. Thank you for seeing me that day. Thank you for not letting your dad drive away." That night, as Daniel drove Claire home, she was quiet but peaceful. "I've been thinking about something," she said, as they pulled up to her apartment building. "About forgiveness." Forgiveness for who? For everyone. For Helen and Howard, who were scared and desperate. For the system that failed me. For Robert Sullivan, who was probably broken himself. Even for Margaret Finch, who thought she was helping. Claire looked out the window at the dark street. "I'm not there yet. But I think I want to be, because holding on to all this anger is like carrying a 100-pound weight everywhere I go. And I'm tired, Daniel. I'm so tired of being angry." "That's the bravest thing I've ever heard," Daniel said quietly. "Rebecca would be proud of you." "I'm proud of you." "One more thing," Claire added. "Thank you for not treating me like a replacement for her. Thank you for seeing me as my own person. It's because you are your own person." Rebecca was sunshine and laughter. Your strength and survival. You're both amazing in different ways. And Mia is lucky to have known both of you, even if she can only know one of you now. Claire smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Good night, Daniel." "Tell Mia I'll see her on Thursday?"
"I will."
"Good night, Claire." As Daniel drove home, he thought about the strange journey they'd all been on. How a simple trip home from school had changed everything. How one moment of paying attention had saved a life and connected a family. How love wasn't always romantic or expected, but could be found in the most unlikely places. Rebecca would have loved Claire. He knew that with certainty. She would have fought for her, protected her, made sure she never felt alone again. And in some way, through Mia, through him, through the family they were building together. Rebecca's love was still doing exactly that. The media stormed 3 months after the court hearing. Nina Rodriguez published her full investigation. The article appeared in the Sunday edition of the Boston Globe, with a front-page feature and a 6-page spread inside. The headline read, "Separated at Birth: How a Corrupt Adoption System Stole One Twin's Future." The story went viral within hours. Nina had done remarkable work, tracking down 12 other families who had been torn apart by Hope Springs Adoption Agency. Some had learned the truth years ago, others were discovering it for the first time through her reporting. The article included photos of Claire and Rebecca side by side. Their identical faces a stark visual reminder of what had been stolen. Claire's phone rang constantly. Talk shows wanted her. Podcasters wanted interviews. A literary agent called about a book deal. It was overwhelming for someone who had spent years trying to be invisible. "I don't want to be famous," Claire told Daniel over coffee at his kitchen table. "I just want a quiet life." "Then have a quiet life," he replied. "You don't owe anyone your story. You've already told the truth. What people do with it is up to them." But ignoring the attention proved impossible when 3 days later, a woman named Joyce Campbell showed up at Claire's apartment. She was in her 50s with graying hair and kind eyes that looked remarkably familiar. "I think I'm your cousin," Joyce said when Claire answered the door. "My mother was your father, Howard's sister. We lost touch with the family after Howard and Helen moved to Massachusetts, but I saw your picture in the paper, and I knew. You have the Brennan eyes." Claire invited her in, hands shaking as she made tea. They spent 3 hours talking, Joyce filling in pieces of family history that Helen had never shared. Grandparents who had immigrated from Ireland, uncles who fought in wars, aunts who were teachers and nurses and mothers, a whole family tree that Claire had never known existed. "There's more of us," Joyce said. "Cousins scattered across the country. Most of them don't know about you yet, but they will. And Claire, they're going to want to meet you. The Brennans take care of their own. After Joyce left, Claire called Daniel, her voice shaking with emotion. I have cousins. I have family beyond you and Mia and Helen. There are people who want to know me. That's wonderful, Daniel said, and he meant it, even as a small part of him worried about Claire being overwhelmed. Take it slow. You don't have to meet everyone at once. But Claire didn't want to take it slow. For the first time in her life, she had people who claimed her, who wanted her, who saw her as belonging to them. She met aunts and uncles and second cousins. She attended a Brennan family reunion in New Hampshire, where 50 relatives gathered to welcome her home. They gave her photo albums and shared stories and made sure she knew she was loved. Daniel watched her bloom. The scared, wary woman who had sat on a piece of cardboard was transforming into someone confident. Someone who laughed easily and hugged without hesitation. It was beautiful to witness. The unexpected complication: not everyone was happy about Claire's newfound family. In January, Daniel received a letter from a law firm representing the estate of Robert Sullivan. Robert's brother Frank, whom nobody had known existed, was challenging Claire's right to Rebecca's family inheritance. This is ridiculous, Greg said, reading the legal documents in Daniel's living room. Claire isn't claiming any of Rebecca's estate. You've been supporting her out of your own money. I know that. But Frank Sullivan is claiming that because Claire was legally adopted by his brother, she has no right to reconnect with the Brennan family or access family documents without permission from the Sullivan family. The Sullivan family that abandoned her when she was 7? Daniel's voice was harsh. The family that never once checked if she was alive or needed help? Unfortunately, the law doesn't care about moral failures, only legal rights. And technically, the adoption was never formally dissolved. Claire is still legally a Sullivan. Claire, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, finally spoke. I don't want their name. I never did. I want to be Claire Brennan like I should have been from the beginning. Then we file a petition to nullify the adoption based on abandonment and to legally change your name, Greg said. It'll take time and it'll be public, but we can do it. The legal battle dragged on for months. Frank Sullivan, it turned out, had seen the news coverage and smelled money. He claimed that if Claire was going to profit from her story through book deals or media appearances, the Sullivan family deserved compensation for raising her, despite the fact that they hadn't raised her at all. The case went before Judge Monroe again. This time, the courtroom was packed with journalists, family members, and curious observers. Frank Sullivan sat on one side with his lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit. Claire sat with Daniel, Gregg, and a small army of Brennan relatives who had come to support her. Mr. Sullivan, Judge Monroe, addressed Frank directly. You're claiming guardianship rights over a woman you've never met, whom your family abandoned 40 years ago, based solely on an adoption that was facilitated through a no-defunct agency that has been proven corrupt. Is that accurate? My brother paid good money for that girl, Frank said. That makes her family, whether she likes it or not. And family takes care of family. By your logic, if family takes care of family, where were you when Claire was living on the streets? Where were you when she was hungry and cold and alone? Judge Monroe's voice was sharp. According to the records, you were living comfortably in Maine, less than 2 hours away from where she was last known to be. I didn't know where she was. Did you look? Frank had no answer. Judge Monroe turned to Claire. Ms. Sullivan, or Ms. Brennan, as you prefer to be called. What do you want from this court? Claire stood, her voice steady. I want my real name. I want to legally be who I should have been from birth. I'm not asking for anything from the Sullivan family. I don't want their money or their recognition. I just want them to let me go, and this court grants your petition. The adoption by Robert Sullivan is hereby nullified on grounds of abandonment and failure to provide care. You are legally free to reclaim your birth name. Welcome home, Claire Brennan. Judge Monroe banged her gavel. And Mr. Sullivan, if you continue to harass this woman, I'll hold you in contempt. Get out of my courtroom. The Brennan family erupted in applause. Claire collapsed into her chair, sobbing with relief. Daniel put his arm around her shoulders, while Mia climbed into her lap, hugging her fiercely. You're really Aunt Brennan now, Mia said. just like it was supposed to be. Building a future spring arrived with cherry blossoms and warm breezes. Claire had been living in Boston for almost a year now. She'd been promoted at the library to assistant coordinator. She'd finished her GED and enrolled in community college classes. She'd gained weight, her face filling out to look even more like Rebecca had. But more importantly, she'd learned to smile, to trust, to believe in tomorrow. Daniel had been watching this transformation with a mixture of pride, something else he wasn't quite ready to name. Claire wasn't Rebecca. She would never be Rebecca. But she was becoming someone equally important in his life, someone he looked forward to seeing, someone whose happiness mattered to him in ways that went beyond obligation or family duty. They were having dinner at his house, a Sunday ritual that had developed over the months. Mia was at a sleepover, leaving Daniel and Claire alone for the first time in a while. They ate pasta and talked about mundane things, comfortable in the silence between topics. "I've been thinking about something," Claire said, as Daniel cleared the plates. "About Rebecca. What about her? I visited her grave last week, brought flowers. I sat there for an hour just talking to her, telling her about my life, about Mia, about you." Claire twisted her napkin in her hands. "I thanked her. Thanked her for what? For living the life I couldn't. For being happy and loved and safe. For having a daughter who's kind and brave and sees the good in people. For marrying a man who doesn't run away when things get complicated." Claire looked up, meeting Daniel's eyes. "I'm not jealous of her anymore. I was at first angry that she got everything while I got nothing. But now I see that her life, her love, it created something good that rippled out to save me. If she hadn't married you, if she hadn't had Mia, I might still be on that street corner. I might be dead." Daniel sat down across from her. "Rebecca would have loved you. She would have fought to find you if she'd known you existed. I know. I feel that somehow, like there's a connection that goes beyond genetics, beyond the grave. Twin intuition, maybe?" Claire smiled softly. "Or maybe I'm just imagining it because I want so badly to have known her. You do know her in a way? Through the people who loved her. Through Mia, who has her laugh. Through Helen, who tells stories about her childhood. Through me, who carries her memory." Daniel reached across the table and took Claire's hand. "And maybe through yourself. You share more than just a face. You both have this incredible strength, this ability to find light even in darkness." "Daniel." Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. "I need to tell you something, and I'm scared to say it out loud. You can tell me anything. I'm falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush. "I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't feel this way about my dead sister's husband, but I can't help it. You've been so kind to me, so patient and good, and somewhere along the way, gratitude became something more. I'll understand if you want me to leave, if this ruins everything." Daniel didn't let go of her hand. He didn't pull away. Instead, he took a deep breath and said the truth. "I've been falling for you too. And yes, it feels complicated and strange and sometimes wrong, but it also feels right. Not because you look like Rebecca, but because you're you. Because you make me laugh. Because you're brave and real and you don't pretend to be anything you're not." "What do we do?" Claire asked. "We take it slow? We don't rush anything. We make sure Mia is okay with it, that she doesn't feel like we're replacing her mother." "Oh." Daniel squeezed her hand. "And we give ourselves permission to be happy, even if it looks different than what we expected." They sat there for a long time, holding hands across the table. Two broken people, finding wholeness in each other. 1 year later, the anniversary of Claire's discovery fell on a Thursday. Daniel took the day off work, pulled Mia out of school early, and drove to the cemetery where Rebecca was buried. Claire met them there, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers, Rebecca's favorite. They stood together at the grave, a family bound by blood and choice and love. Mia had grown taller, nearly to Claire's shoulder now. She read a poem she'd written for her mother, about stars and angels and the ways love never really ends. Claire added her own words. Speaking to the sister she'd never met but had come to know through stories and memory, "Thank you for the gift of your family. I'll take care of them, I promise." I'll love them the way you would have, and I'll make sure Mia always knows how special her mother was." Daniel didn't speak. He simply laid a hand on the headstone, silently thanking his first love for leading him to his second. As they walked back to the car, Mia took both their hands, swinging between them. "Mom's happy," she announced with the certainty of a child who believed in magic. "I can feel it. She's happy we're together." "How do you know?" Claire asked gently. "'Cause I dreamed about her last night. She told me she picked you special, like a gift she was saving for later. She said you and Daddy were supposed to meet, that it was always meant to be this way." Daniel and Claire exchanged glances over Mia's head, both feeling the truth of a child's simple faith. Maybe it was all coincidence. Maybe there was no cosmic plan. But maybe, just maybe, Rebecca had known somehow that the sister she'd never met would one day need the family she'd left behind, and that family would need her just as much. 6 months later, Daniel and Claire got married in a small ceremony attended by the growing Brennan clan. Helen was there in her wheelchair, crying happy tears. Mia served as maid of honor, wearing a dress the same color as the one Rebecca had worn at her own wedding. It wasn't disrespectful, Claire had insisted. It was a bridge between past and present, a way of including Rebecca in their joy. They honeymooned modestly, just a weekend at a bed and breakfast in Vermont. Claire had never been on a vacation before. She cried when she saw the mountains, overwhelmed by the beauty of a world she was only now learning to see. Daniel asked, finding her on the balcony watching the sunset, thinking about second chances. About how one moment, one choice to look instead of drive away, changed everything. About how miracles sometimes look like disasters at first. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am to be alive." "I'm grateful you're alive, too," Daniel whispered into her hair. "So grateful." Back in Boston, life continued its gentle rhythm. Claire finished her degree and got a job as a social worker, specializing in helping homeless individuals navigate the system. She became an advocate, a voice for those who had no voice. Using her story to create change, Daniel's architecture firm flourished. He designed a community center that included transitional housing, fulfilling a dream he and Claire had talked about on one of their early dates. The Claire Brennan Center opened 2 years after their wedding. Funded by donations that poured in after Nina's article and Claire's advocacy work, Mia grew up surrounded by love, knowing both her mothers in different ways. One lived in memories and photographs and stories told on quiet evenings. The other lived in the present, teaching her about resilience and second chances and the power of never giving up. On the 10-year anniversary of that first sighting, the family returned to the street corner where Daniel had found Claire. It had changed dramatically. The old storefronts had been renovated,